The parking lot encounter. Michael Jennings pulled into the bustling grocery store parking lot on a bright Saturday afternoon. The sun shone down with an inviting warmth, and the air buzzed with the sounds of families enjoying their weekends. Children laughed, couples chatted animatedly, and the faint aroma of freshly baked bread wafted from the store's entrance. As he navigated through the maze of cars and people, Michael felt a sense of ease. Today was about tackling the weekly shopping list and maybe treating himself to a new book from the store's small selection. Scanning the parking lot, he noticed a few open spots at the far end, but had no desire to walk an extra mile with heavy bags. Then, like a beacon of hope, an empty space came into view, perfectly situated near the entrance. Michael's spirits lifted as he turned on his blinker, signaling his intent. He maneuvered his car smoothly into the coveted space, ensuring it was centered and neatly parked between the white lines. It was a minor victory in the chaotic rhythm of the day. As he exited his vehicle, a soft breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees, and Michael took a moment to appreciate the mundane beauty of the afternoon. He breathed in deeply, ready to tackle the grocery list and perhaps enjoy a hot coffee afterward. However, his serene moment was abruptly interrupted by the screeching of tires. His heart sank as he turned to see a white SUV pulling into the lot with alarming speed. Inside the vehicle was a woman, her face contorted with anger even before she rolled down the window. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice piercing through the ambient noise of the bustling parking lot. "That was my spot." Michael blinked, taken aback by the sudden confrontation. "Excuse me," he replied, striving to keep his voice steady, despite the bewilderment rising within him. The woman, already halfway out of her SUV, slammed the door with a force that startled him. "I was waiting for that spot. I had my blinker on and everything." She stepped closer, invading his personal space, her finger jabbing in the air, punctuating her words with hostility. Michael quickly glanced around the parking lot, noting that no other vehicles were in sight, nor had he seen anyone signaling for the space. He felt a surge of confusion mixed with the need to defend himself against her aggressive approach. "I'm sorry, but I didn't see you waiting," he replied, attempting to maintain a calm demeanor. "I thought it was open." Her eyes narrowed, and she stepped even closer, her voice rising. "You're just another one of those people who think they can take whatever they want. You don't own this place." Michael felt a sting at her words, the implication behind them hanging heavily in the air. "I'm just trying to park," he said, trying to reason with her. "There are plenty of spots in the lot." Yet, his attempts at diplomacy only seemed to fuel her anger. "You think you can just come in here and take what's mine?" She spat, her face flushed with rage. "This isn't over, you hear me?" Michael's stomach churned with unease. He hadn't anticipated this confrontation, nor had he prepared for the racial undertones now bubbling to the surface. In a moment, the parking lot had transformed from a mundane space into a battleground of prejudice and misunderstanding. "I didn't mean to upset you," he said, his voice softening in an effort to de-escalate the situation. "Can we just forget about it and move on?" But instead of backing down, the woman's expression twisted further in fury. "Forget about it. You need to learn some respect." With a swift motion, she turned and stormed back toward her vehicle, her anger palpable. Michael felt a mix of anger and confusion wash over him. He wanted to dismiss her as just another angry shopper, but the weight of the confrontation lingered in the back of his mind. He was aware that many others had likely experienced similar altercations, often rooted in deeper societal issues. Yet, he had hoped for a day free from such tension. As he took a few steps away from his car, intending to shake off the encounter and head into the store, he heard the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against metal. Whipping around, he was horrified to see the woman running her keys along the side of his car, leaving deep scratches across the glossy paint. "Hey, what are you doing?" Michael shouted, his heart racing. He rushed towards her, desperate to stop the vandalism unfolding before him. She paused, looking over her shoulder with a smirk. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before taking someone's spot. With that, she finished her destructive act, stepping back to admire her handiwork, as if it were a masterpiece. Michael felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him. "You can't just do that," he yelled, the frustration bubbling to the surface. "You need to stop." But she merely shrugged, the smirk still plastered on her face. "What are you going to do about it?" Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, anger, disbelief, and a sense of violation, Michael reached for his phone, feeling the urgency to report this incident. "I'm calling the police," he stated firmly, his voice steady despite the storm of feelings raging inside him. She laughed derisively, stepping back toward her SUV. "Go ahead. They'll side with me, you know. You're just another man trying to play the victim." He felt the weight of her words, the implications of her racial bias. Yet he didn't want to engage further. He felt the adrenaline coursing through him, propelling him to action. Dialing 911, he recounted the incident as calmly as he could, providing details about the vandalism and the aggressive confrontation. As he hung up, the woman continued to pace near her vehicle, her demeanor shifting between hostility and mockery. "You're pathetic," she spat, crossing her arms. "You think you can just play the race card and get sympathy." Michael took a deep breath, feeling the heat of her accusations settle on his shoulders. He was determined not to let her words provoke him any further. "This isn't about race," he said, trying to remain composed. "This is about you vandalizing my car. It's wrong." "Whatever you say, sweetheart," she replied dismissively, rolling her eyes as she leaned against her SUV. The police arrived moments later, the flashing lights cutting through the ordinary hustle and bustle of the parking lot. Michael felt a mix of relief and anxiety wash over him. He approached the officers, recounting the events that had unfolded. The woman stood off to the side, her arms crossed defiantly, her expression a mixture of disdain and amusement. After assessing the situation, the officers took statements from both parties. Michael felt an odd sense of power as he spoke about the incident, revealing the truth of what had occurred. For too long, many had faced similar situations in silence, fearing the repercussions of speaking up. But today, he had found his voice amid the chaos, and he wasn't going to let that moment pass without standing his ground. As the officers spoke with the woman, she attempted to spin the narrative in her favor, her voice rising with indignation. "He's lying. I was just protecting my rights." Michael stood firm, knowing that the truth was on his side. The situation had escalated beyond a simple parking dispute, transforming into something more significant, a reflection of the prejudice and misunderstandings that often permeated everyday life. In that parking lot, beneath the bright sun and among the hustle of shoppers, Michael felt the weight of societal expectations and personal resilience intertwining. Today, he was not just a victim, but a man asserting his right to stand against injustice, no matter how small it might seem. As the officers took their time reviewing the situation, he understood that the real battle lay not just in the immediate conflict, but in the broader context of respect and dignity that everyone deserved, regardless of their race. The day had taken a sharp turn from the ordinary to the extraordinary, and Michael felt a growing sense of purpose. The encounter was not merely about a parking spot or a scratched car. It was about reclaiming agency in a world that often sought to diminish it. The story was just beginning, and he was determined to see it through to the end. The aftermath of confrontation. As the sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows across the parking lot, Michael felt a knot of tension in his stomach. The officers were still discussing the incident with the woman, who seemed to revel in her role as the aggrieved party. He couldn't shake the feeling that her tone and demeanor were not just reflective of her character, but also a window into a broader societal issue that transcended this one incident. Michael took a step back, watching as shoppers continued with their routines, oblivious to the drama unfolding just a few feet away. He wanted to scream for them to pay attention, to understand the complexities of the situation that stretched far beyond the simple act of parking a car. In that moment, he became acutely aware of how quickly one person's aggression could spiral into a public spectacle, challenging the very fabric of community and understanding. The officers, after speaking with the woman, approached Michael. "Can you tell us again what happened?" one of them asked, a notepad in hand, ready to document the incident. Taking a deep breath, Michael recounted the events with clarity, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I pulled into the parking space, and she accused me of stealing it. I tried to explain that I hadn't seen her waiting, but she got aggressive and started yelling. Then she vandalized my car," he stated, gesturing toward the long scratches etched into the vehicle surface. "I just want her to be held accountable for her actions." The officer nodded, taking notes as he listened intently. "We'll take your statement and get your contact information. It might take some time, but we'll follow up on this." As the officers continued to ask questions, Michael noticed the woman lurking nearby, her body language shifting from confident to defensive. The initial bravado seemed to dissipate, replaced by a hint of uncertainty as the officers took him seriously. Michael couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction at her discomfort, a small reminder that sometimes standing your ground could shift the balance of power. Once the officers finished their questioning, they assured Michael that they would look into the matter further. "If you'd like, you can file a formal report about the vandalism," one of them suggested. "We can get in touch with you once we gather all the information." Michael nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. "Yes, please. I want to ensure this doesn't just get swept under the rug." As the officers walked away to converse with the woman, Michael turned his attention back to his car. He felt an overwhelming urge to leave, to escape the suffocating tension that had enveloped him since he first stepped out of his vehicle. Yet, as he inspected the damage, the reality of the situation sunk in. The scratch marks were stark against the shiny paint, a visual reminder of the confrontation that had spiraled out of control. He leaned against his car, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. The encounter had been more than just a dispute over a parking spot. It had tapped into something deeper, an unspoken conversation about race, privilege, and societal expectations. Michael had always been aware of the prejudices that existed in the world, but to confront one so directly was both frightening and enlightening. As he stood there, he thought of the stories he had heard from friends and family, tales of racial profiling, discrimination, and injustice that echoed in his mind. Each story was a reminder of the battles fought daily by people of color, often in silence, and the emotional toll it took. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He recalled a conversation he'd had with his grandfather, who had shared his own experiences growing up in a racially divided world. "You have to speak up," his grandfather had said, eyes filled with wisdom. "Silence only allows the problem to grow." The memory ignited a sense of resolve within Michael. He didn't want to remain silent. Today had been a catalyst, a push toward acknowledging the complexities of his identity and the struggles faced by so many others. He thought about the importance of advocacy and how it started with standing up for oneself, but it also involved lifting others up and amplifying their voices. As he prepared to head into the grocery store, he caught a glimpse of the woman still speaking with the officers. She was gesticulating wildly, her tone animated as she likely spun her own narrative of victimhood. A wave of frustration washed over him, but he reminded himself to remain composed. Inside the store, he navigated the aisles, still feeling the weight of the earlier confrontation. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him, and shoppers moved around like ghosts, engrossed in their own thoughts and purchases. He picked up items from his list mechanically, his mind swirling with reflections on the day's events. In a corner of the store, he spotted a small display of books and decided to browse through them. One particular title caught his eye: The Art of Resilience, Finding Strength in Adversity. He picked it up, feeling an inexplicable connection to its theme. Perhaps it was a sign, an affirmation that he was not alone in his struggles and that others had faced adversity with courage and determination. With the book in hand, he continued shopping, but his thoughts drifted back to the encounter outside. The racial dynamics, the woman's aggression, and his own response lingered in his mind. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that their confrontation was a reflection of the larger societal issues at play. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he had a responsibility not just to himself, but also to those who might face similar situations without a voice. After checking out, he stepped outside, the weight of the shopping bags a welcome distraction from his thoughts. He couldn't ignore the damage to his car, however. The scratches seemed to mock him, a physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil he had experienced that day. As he approached his vehicle, he noticed a small crowd of people had gathered nearby. They were watching the woman, who appeared to be arguing with the officers, her voice rising in indignation. He felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension, unsure if he wanted to become entangled in another confrontation. But as he drew closer, he overheard snippets of their conversation. The woman was claiming that she had felt threatened by Michael, trying to paint herself as the victim in this saga. It ignited a fire within him. How could she twist the narrative so easily? How could she deflect from her actions? Taking a deep breath, he approached the group, willing to stand up for himself and share his side of the story. "Excuse me," he interjected, his voice steady but firm. "I'm the one who parked in the spot. I did not see her waiting, and she vandalized my car when I tried to walk away." The crowd turned their attention to him, some faces showing sympathy while others appeared skeptical. The woman shot him a glare, her expression a mixture of disbelief and rage. "You're lying," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "You think you can just twist the truth." Michael felt a surge of frustration, but he stayed focused on his goal. "I have witnesses. There are plenty of people here who saw what happened," he replied, gesturing to the shoppers milling about. "I'm not going to let you make me into the villain in this story." The officers looked between them, sensing the rising tension. "All right, let's all take a step back," one of the officers said, trying to diffuse the situation. "We're here to handle this matter appropriately." Michael held his ground, refusing to let the woman's antics dictate the narrative any longer. He turned to the onlookers. "If anyone here saw what happened, please don't hesitate to speak up. It's important for everyone to understand that we need to hold each other accountable, regardless of race or background." In that moment, something shifted. A few bystanders nodded in agreement, murmuring their support for Michael's stance. The tide was beginning to turn. It was empowering to see that standing up for himself not only mattered to him, but also resonated with those around him. The woman, sensing the loss of control, continued to rant, but her voice lost its strength amid the murmurs of the crowd. Michael felt a sense of solidarity in that moment, a realization that community could stand behind truth and justice. After several minutes, the officers decided to separate the two parties, insisting they would handle the investigation. As they led the woman away, Michael felt an immense weight lift off his shoulders. It was clear that the confrontation had been more than just a personal battle. It had become a shared experience for those who had witnessed the altercation. As Michael walked to his car, he noticed a small group of shoppers still lingering, their expressions a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "Are you okay?" one woman asked, her voice soft. "Yeah, I'll be fine," Michael replied, appreciating the kindness. "It's just been a crazy day." The woman nodded, glancing at the scratches on his car. "People can be so aggressive over nothing sometimes," she said, shaking her head. "I'm glad you stood up for yourself." Michael smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Thank you. It's important to speak up when something is wrong, even when it's uncomfortable." With a renewed sense of purpose, he climbed into his car and took a moment to collect his thoughts. The incident had sparked something within him, a desire to be more than just a passive participant in his own life. He wanted to advocate for justice and understanding, not just for himself, but for others who felt voiceless in similar situations. As he drove away from the parking lot, he reflected on the lessons learned. Today had been a stark reminder of the societal issues that lurked beneath the surface, issues that demanded attention and action. He realized that while the world could be fraught with tension, it also held the potential for resilience, solidarity, and change. Michael decided that he wouldn't let this experience fade into a distant memory. He would channel his energy into raising awareness, sharing his story, and standing up against injustice. He thought about reaching out to local community groups that focused on racial equity and advocacy. Perhaps in sharing his experience, he could help others who had faced similar situations, empowering them to find their own voices. As he drove home, he felt a sense of determination settle within him. The day had begun with an ordinary task, but it had morphed into a pivotal moment in his life, a moment that ignited a fire within him to stand against prejudice and become an advocate for change. This was only the beginning of a new journey, and Michael was ready to embrace whatever came next. A call to action. Michael returned home with a mix of emotions swirling inside him: anger, relief, confusion, and an undeniable sense of purpose. As he entered his apartment, the familiar scent of coffee greeted him, a comforting reminder of the routine that had been disrupted earlier that day. He dropped his grocery bags onto the counter, but the day's events lingered in his mind like a cloud that refused to dissipate. After pouring himself a cup of coffee, he sank into his couch, staring blankly at the wall for a moment. The scratches on his car felt like a metaphor for the deeper wounds inflicted by society's prejudices. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice echoing in his mind. "If you see something wrong, you must say something. Silence is complicity." Feeling the weight of his grandfather's wisdom, Michael picked up his phone and began searching for local community organizations focused on social justice and racial equity. He needed a way to channel the anger and confusion he felt into something constructive. Scrolling through the options, he found a nearby nonprofit that focused on promoting dialogue around race and advocating for policy changes. It was exactly what he was looking for. Before he knew it, he was drafting an email to the organization, expressing his interest in attending their next meeting. He wrote passionately about his recent experience and how it had ignited a desire to be more involved in the community. He hit send, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It was a small step, but it was a step nonetheless. That night, Michael struggled to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the woman's enraged face flashed in his mind, coupled with the sound of her keys scraping against his car. He tossed and turned, finally deciding to get up and write down his thoughts. As he put pen to paper, the floodgates opened. He wrote about the confrontation in detail, the emotions he felt, the way her words stung, and how the whole encounter felt like a microcosm of a larger societal issue. He reflected on his upbringing and the values instilled in him about respect and justice. With every word, he felt the tension in his chest begin to ease. Writing became a cathartic outlet, allowing him to process the chaos of the day and turn it into something tangible. After pouring out his thoughts, he decided to share his experience on social media. He was hesitant at first. Vulnerability was never easy, especially when it came to topics as sensitive as race and prejudice. But he felt an overwhelming urge to raise awareness. He crafted a post that detailed the confrontation, focusing on the importance of standing up against injustice and encouraging others to speak out. With a deep breath, he clicked post, and his heart raced. He watched as notifications began to roll in, likes, shares, and comments of support. Friends and acquaintances expressed their solidarity, sharing their own experiences with racial bias and discrimination. Michael was overwhelmed by the response, realizing that he was not alone in this struggle. The next morning, he received an email from the nonprofit he had contacted. They invited him to their next meeting, which was scheduled for that Thursday. Excitement surged through him. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, a chance to connect with others who shared his passion for social justice and advocacy. As Thursday approached, Michael found himself growing increasingly anxious. He had always considered himself an introvert, preferring the comfort of his small circle of friends to the unpredictability of large gatherings. But he knew that stepping outside of his comfort zone was essential if he wanted to affect change. When the day finally arrived, he put on his best shirt, a casual but sharp choice that made him feel confident. As he walked to the community center, He practiced what he would say. Would he be able to convey his experience effectively? Would others relate to his story? The questions raced through his mind, but he pushed them aside, focusing on the potential impact of his participation. Upon arriving, he found the community center bustling with activity. A diverse group of people filled the room, young and old, men and women, individuals from various backgrounds. Michael felt an initial wave of apprehension wash over him, but he took a deep breath and stepped inside. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming. People greeted each other with smiles and engaged in conversations that filled the air with hope and determination. Michael spotted a table with brochures and pamphlets about the organization's initiatives. He approached the table, feeling a sense of belonging as he picked up a flyer detailing their upcoming events and outreach programs. The meeting began with a facilitator introducing the organization's mission. They focused on creating a space for open dialogue, understanding, and advocacy against racial injustice. As the facilitator spoke, Michael felt his nerves begin to settle. This was exactly what he had been seeking, a community committed to change. After the introduction, attendees were invited to share their own experiences and perspectives. As each person spoke, Michael listened intently. Stories of discrimination, resilience, and hope filled the room, creating a tapestry of shared struggles and triumphs. He was struck by the diversity of voices, each one uniquely valuable, contributing to a collective understanding of the challenges they faced. When it was finally his turn to speak, Michael felt his heart race again. He stood up, clearing his throat. "Hi, I'm Michael," he began, feeling a wave of support from the room. "I recently had an experience that really shook me. I was confronted in a grocery store parking lot over a parking space, but it quickly escalated into something much deeper. It made me realize how pervasive racial tension can be, even in everyday situations." As he spoke, he felt a sense of empowerment wash over him. The more he shared, the more he saw nods of understanding and empathy among the audience. He described the vandalism of his car and the anger that surged within him, but he also emphasized the importance of standing up against such injustices. We can't stay silent. We need to speak out, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who feels marginalized. He concluded, his voice steady and resolute. After he finished, a round of applause erupted in the room, and Michael felt a rush of warmth spread through him. He realized he wasn't just sharing his story. He was igniting a conversation that could lead to change. The facilitator encouraged further discussion, and many attendees chimed in, sharing their own experiences and offering support. One woman, a teacher in the local school district, spoke passionately about the importance of educating young people about racial sensitivity and empathy. "We need to start these conversations early, before biases can take root," she said, her eyes sparkling with determination. Another man, an activist who had been involved in community organizing for years, shared his journey of advocating for policy changes in the local government. "It's not just about awareness. We need to push for tangible changes in our policies and institutions," he urged, rallying the group's spirits. As the meeting continued, Michael found himself feeling more inspired than ever. The collective energy in the room was palpable, a mix of hope, anger, and determination to fight for justice. He exchanged contact information with several attendees, eager to stay connected and continue the dialogue. After the meeting, Michael left the community center feeling lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He realized that his experience had not only motivated him to speak out, but had also connected him with others who shared his passion for justice. He had found his community, a group of individuals ready to work together for change. Over the following weeks, Michael became an active member of the organization. He attended meetings regularly, participated in planning community outreach events, and even helped organize workshops focused on educating others about racial bias and the importance of allyship. Each time he engaged with the community, he felt a deeper sense of purpose, a feeling that he was making a difference. As he immersed himself in this new chapter of his life, he met individuals who inspired him, each with their own unique stories and motivations for advocating for change. He learned about systemic issues affecting marginalized communities and the importance of solidarity in the fight for justice. One evening, after a particularly impactful meeting, Michael found himself reflecting on the transformation he had undergone since that fateful day in the parking lot. The anger that had initially consumed him had evolved into a passionate commitment to advocating for others. He realized that while he had entered the community seeking to reclaim his voice, he had discovered a much larger purpose: fighting against injustice and supporting those who felt silenced. Yet Michael was also acutely aware that the journey was far from over. The world was still filled with challenges, and there were many battles yet to be fought. He often thought of the woman who had confronted him that day. What had fueled her rage? What biases lay beneath her actions? These questions propelled him forward, motivating him to engage in more dialogues, host community workshops, and raise awareness about the importance of empathy and understanding. He envisioned creating a space where individuals from all backgrounds could come together to share their experiences and learn from one another. As he delved deeper into his advocacy, Michael began drafting plans for a community event, a day dedicated to fostering dialogue about race, privilege, and the importance of allyship. He reached out to local leaders, inviting them to speak and share their perspectives. He hoped to create an environment where people could come together, listen, and learn from one another's experiences. On the day of the event, the community center was buzzing with energy. Michael welcomed attendees as they arrived, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He wanted this day to be impactful, a stepping stone toward greater understanding and compassion among community members. The event kicked off with a panel discussion featuring local leaders, educators, and activists. They shared their experiences and insights, addressing the importance of acknowledging privilege and taking action to support marginalized voices. Michael felt a surge of pride as he watched people engage with the panel, asking questions and sharing their own stories. After the panel, attendees broke into smaller groups for discussions, allowing for more intimate conversations. Michael facilitated one of the groups, encouraging participants to share their thoughts and feelings. The conversations flowed, filled with vulnerability and honesty. As the day progressed, Michael felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. The room was alive with dialogue, understanding, and connection. People who had once felt isolated were now sharing their stories and finding common ground. At the end of the day, as attendees mingled and exchanged contact information, Michael realized that he had not just organized an event. He had helped create a movement toward understanding, respect, and solidarity. As he cleaned up the room, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had undertaken. That fateful day in the parking lot had been a catalyst for change, pushing him to confront injustice and advocate for a better world. He knew that there was still work to be done, but for the first time, he felt hopeful about the future. With every step he took, he felt more empowered, not just as an individual but as part of a community united in purpose. Michael had found his voice, and with it, he would continue to inspire others to find theirs, ensuring that the stories of struggle and resilience would echo far beyond the walls of their community center. Together, they would rise, confronting the shadows of prejudice and building a brighter, more inclusive future for all. Building bridges. As the weeks rolled into months, Michael's commitment to advocacy deepened. The community event he organized had ignited a spark of enthusiasm among attendees, leading to ongoing discussions and initiatives aimed at promoting awareness and understanding around racial issues. Each week, the nonprofit group gathered to strategize and plan future outreach programs, and Michael found himself taking on more leadership roles. One chilly Saturday morning, Michael arrived at the community center for a meeting filled with anticipation. The organization had received a grant to create a series of workshops focusing on empathy, understanding bias, and fostering allyship in the community. They would involve local schools, businesses, and community leaders. Michael felt exhilarated by the possibilities. This was a chance to reach a broader audience and engage people from all walks of life. As the meeting commenced, the energy in the room was palpable. Members shared ideas about how to structure the workshops and what topics to cover. Michael proposed incorporating real-life stories and testimonials from community members, stories that illustrated the effects of bias and prejudice. He suggested inviting local students to share their experiences, creating a space where their voices could be heard. "We need to show how deeply these issues affect real people," he said passionately. "Statistics and facts are important, but it's the stories that truly resonate. They help others understand the emotional impact of their actions and attitudes." Nods of agreement surrounded him, and they began to brainstorm how to facilitate these workshops effectively. They decided to hold an initial session at the local high school, targeting students who were in their formative years, ready to shape their perspectives on race and community engagement. As they finalized the details, Michael felt a sense of urgency and responsibility. He knew firsthand how critical it was to reach young minds. He reflected on his own teenage years, how easily he had been influenced by his environment, the conversations he had witnessed, and the biases he had absorbed without question. This was an opportunity to change the narrative, to provide students with the tools to think critically and act compassionately. The day of the workshop arrived, and Michael arrived at the high school buzzing with excitement and nerves. He was greeted by a mix of anxious students and enthusiastic teachers, all eager to participate. The atmosphere in the auditorium was electric as students filed in, chattering and laughing, completely unaware of the conversations they were about to engage in. Michael began the workshop by introducing himself and sharing his own story, the encounter in the parking lot that had changed his life and propelled him into advocacy. "I want you to know that what happened to me is not just an isolated incident. It reflects larger issues in our society," he explained. "We all have a role to play in creating a community where everyone feels safe and respected." As he spoke, he watched the students closely. Some listened intently, others fidgeted in their seats, but he sensed that many were curious, perhaps even ready to engage in the difficult conversations that lay ahead. He posed questions to encourage reflection. "How many of you have ever witnessed or experienced bias or discrimination? What did you do about it?" The room fell silent, and a few hands slowly went up. One young woman shared her experience of being bullied because of her background, her voice trembling but steady. "I felt so alone. It was like no one cared," she admitted, her vulnerability drawing a collective sigh from the audience. Michael nodded, feeling a deep connection to her story. "You're not alone, and your feelings are valid," he reassured her. "Many people experience these things, and it's crucial that we talk about them, share our stories, and support one another." As the workshop progressed, students began to open up. They shared experiences, listened to each other, and engaged in meaningful dialogue about empathy, respect, and the power of allyship. Michael facilitated small group discussions, allowing students to explore their thoughts in a more intimate setting. One group of students debated the importance of standing up for one another, discussing moments when they had witnessed bullying or prejudice. "It's hard to speak up, especially when you see someone being treated unfairly," one boy confessed. "But I think if we all do it together, it might make it easier." "That's the key," Michael interjected. "Building a culture of support where everyone feels empowered to stand up against injustice. It starts with us, right here, right now." The feedback from the students was overwhelmingly positive. They expressed gratitude for the opportunity to share their stories and learn from one another. As they wrapped up the workshop, Michael felt a profound sense of hope. They were planting seeds of understanding, nurturing empathy, and igniting the commitment to allyship among the next generation. After the workshop, Michael received messages from several students, thanking him for the experience and asking how they could get involved in the advocacy efforts. One young girl, Maya, expressed a desire to help organize future workshops. "I want to spread the word about what we learned today," she wrote. "It feels so important to me now." Michael felt his heart swell with pride and excitement. The impact of their discussions was rippling outward, creating a network of motivated young people ready to engage with these critical issues. He quickly responded, inviting Maya and others to the next planning meeting for the nonprofit. As the weeks continued, Michael and his fellow advocates began to develop a series of workshops, not only for high school students, but also for local businesses, focusing on creating inclusive workplaces and fostering environments of understanding. They reached out to companies in the area, offering training sessions on diversity and inclusion, aiming to educate employees about the significance of empathy and allyship in their professional lives. Each workshop led to more discussions, more stories shared, and more connections forged. Michael found himself forming friendships with others in the organization who were equally passionate about the cause. They collaborated to design resources that would empower participants, such as informational brochures, guides on how to address bias, and testimonials from community members who had faced discrimination. One evening, as Michael sat with his fellow advocates in the community center, he proposed an idea for a larger event, a community forum focused on bridging divides and fostering dialogue across different cultural backgrounds. We need to create a space where everyone feels invited to share their experiences, regardless of their race or background, he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. A place where we can discuss our differences, but also our common humanity. His suggestion was met with enthusiasm. They began brainstorming ways to organize the event, reaching out to local leaders, activists, and cultural organizations to participate. The forum would include panel discussions, workshops, and opportunities for attendees to share their stories in a supportive environment. As the planning progressed, Michael felt a sense of urgency. The world around them seemed to be fraught with tension, and incidents of prejudice were still prevalent in the community. He wanted this forum to be a catalyst for change, a rallying point for those who yearned for understanding and compassion. The day of the community forum arrived, and Michael was filled with excitement and nervousness as he set up the space. Colorful banners decorated the walls, showcasing the diverse cultures represented in their community. Tables were adorned with brochures and resources about racial equity and allyship, and the air was filled with the buzz of conversation as attendees arrived. Michael opened the forum, welcoming everyone with a warm smile. Thank you all for being here today. We are gathered not just to talk about our differences, but to celebrate our shared humanity. Together, we can create a community that values empathy, understanding, and respect for all. As the event unfolded, he watched people engage in discussions, share their stories, and connect with one another. It was powerful to witness individuals from various backgrounds finding common ground, their shared experiences weaving a tapestry of resilience and hope. The panel discussions featured leaders from different cultural backgrounds, each sharing their experiences and insights on the importance of allyship and community engagement. They spoke passionately about the need for collective action to address systemic issues and foster understanding. In one poignant moment, a local activist shared a story about her own struggles with discrimination and how community support had helped her navigate those challenges. It's not enough to be non-racist. We must actively be anti-racist. We need to stand up for one another, not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's uncomfortable, she declared, her words resonating with the audience. The forum continued with breakout sessions where participants engaged in deeper conversations about their own experiences and explored how they could be allies in their everyday lives. Michael facilitated one of these groups, guiding discussions and encouraging attendees to think critically about their roles in creating change. As the day came to a close, the sense of connection and understanding among attendees was palpable. Michael felt a deep sense of fulfillment as he reflected on the impact of the forum. They had created a space where people felt seen and heard, where the weight of their stories was acknowledged, and where hope for change was ignited. In the weeks that followed, the momentum from the community forum continued to grow. Attendees reached out to Michael and the organization, expressing their interest in continuing the dialogue and getting involved in future initiatives. The ripple effect of their work was becoming increasingly evident as more individuals began to engage in conversations about racial equity and justice. With renewed energy, Michael and his fellow advocates began planning a series of follow-up workshops and community discussions. They established a newsletter to keep the community informed about upcoming events and resources available for those interested in learning more about allyship and advocacy. One evening, as he sat at home reflecting on the journey thus far, Michael realized how far he had come since that day in the parking lot. He had transformed anger and confusion into action, building bridges between individuals and fostering a community committed to understanding and compassion. Yet he knew that the journey was ongoing. There would always be challenges, setbacks, and moments of frustration, but he felt more equipped than ever to face them. The relationships he had built, the stories he had shared, and the connections he had fostered had created a strong foundation for continued advocacy. With a heart full of gratitude and determination, Michael resolved to keep pushing forward, not just for himself, but for all those who had shared their stories with him. He was no longer just an individual seeking justice. He was part of a collective movement aimed at creating a more equitable world. And as he looked to the future, he felt hopeful. Together, they would continue to build bridges, fostering understanding, empathy, and allyship in their community, one conversation at a time. The challenges ahead. As the seasons changed and the leaves turned vibrant shades of orange and gold, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose within him. The workshops, community forums, and ongoing discussions had created a foundation for advocacy that was now beginning to take root in the community. Yet he also recognized that with this progress came new challenges and complexities that required careful navigation. One crisp autumn morning, Michael sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by notes and materials for the upcoming workshops. He had spent the last few weeks refining the curriculum, incorporating feedback from participants, and focusing on creating a more immersive experience for attendees. As he sipped his steaming cup of coffee, he felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. While he had witnessed a surge in interest from the community, he was also aware that not everyone was supportive of their efforts. Whispers of dissent had begun to surface. He had heard rumors of pushback from certain groups who felt threatened by the discussion surrounding race and privilege. Some believed that the conversation about systemic racism was an attack on their values and identities, rather than an invitation to engage in dialogue. Determined to stay the course, Michael reached out to his fellow advocates and scheduled a meeting to address these concerns head-on. They needed a strategy for how to approach the potential backlash and ensure that their message remained clear and focused on unity, understanding, and allyship. When the night of the meeting arrived, Michael felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The room was filled with familiar faces, all equally passionate about the cause. They began discussing the rumors they had heard, weighing the risks and benefits of continuing their work amid growing tensions. "We need to be prepared for any opposition," said Sarah, a fellow advocate who had been involved in community organizing for years. "But we also have to remember that our goal is not to alienate people. We want to invite them into the conversation, not push them away." Michael nodded, appreciating Sarah's perspective. "Exactly. We should focus on promoting dialogue and understanding, even with those who might disagree with us. Maybe we can host a community dialogue session specifically for those who are hesitant to engage in these discussions. A chance for them to voice their concerns and ask questions without judgment." The group agreed that facilitating an open dialogue could be a beneficial approach. They brainstormed ways to frame the event, emphasizing the importance of listening and understanding different perspectives. They envisioned a space where individuals could share their experiences, confront their biases, and foster connections, even in the midst of disagreement. As the date for the new dialogue session approached, Michael felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He understood that the session could serve as a turning point in bridging gaps between community members, but he also feared that it might open the door to more hostility. On the day of the event, Michael arrived early to set up the room, arranging chairs in a circle to promote a sense of equality among participants. The air was thick with anticipation as attendees trickled in, each carrying their own expectations and experiences. He welcomed each person with a warm smile, hoping to ease any tension they might feel. As the session began, Michael opened the floor by explaining the purpose of the gathering. This is a space for dialogue, an opportunity for us to share our thoughts and experiences without judgment. We want to foster understanding and connection. So let's start by listening to one another. The group consisted of a diverse mix of people, some who were eager to engage and others who appeared skeptical. As they shared their thoughts, the conversations flowed, ranging from personal experiences with bias to concerns about the changing dynamics in their community. At one point, a middle-aged man named Frank spoke up, his voice filled with frustration. "I don't see what the big deal is. I've never had issues based on race. Why do we need to keep talking about this? It feels like a guilt trip." Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He understood Frank's perspective, but knew that it was essential to address his concerns without dismissing them. "I appreciate you sharing that, Frank. It's important to acknowledge that not everyone experiences bias in the same way. For many people in our community, their race affects their daily lives, how they're treated, the opportunities available to them. This isn't about guilt. It's about understanding the diverse experiences of others." Several attendees nodded, and one woman chimed in. "I think it's essential to recognize our privileges and how they shape our perceptions. It doesn't mean we should feel guilty. It just means we can become more aware and compassionate." As the discussion continued, Michael was impressed by the willingness of attendees to engage with one another. They debated ideas passionately but respectfully, seeking common ground rather than digging in their heels. He sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a movement toward understanding. However, just as the conversation reached a productive crescendo, a few voices of dissent emerged from the back of the room. A small group had entered late, visibly agitated. They expressed frustration at what they perceived as an attack on their beliefs and values. "This is ridiculous," shouted one man. "You're trying to make us feel bad for things we didn't do. Enough with the blame game." Michael's heart raced. He had anticipated potential pushback, but the intensity of their anger caught him off guard. He took a deep breath, striving to remain calm. "We're not here to blame anyone. We want to foster understanding and dialogue, not division." Another member of the dissenting group chimed in. "But why should we change how we think just because it offends some people? This is a free country." The tension in the room escalated, and Michael could feel the weight of every eye on him. He knew they were at a crossroads. This moment could either shatter the dialogue they had built or solidify it by demonstrating the power of respect and understanding. "Let's take a moment," Michael said, raising his hand slightly to calm the growing tension. "We all have valid feelings and perspectives. Let's focus on listening to each other. I invite you to share your thoughts, but I ask that we do so respectfully, allowing everyone to voice their experiences." Slowly, the group quieted down, and he could sense the hesitance in the air. One of the attendees from the initial group spoke up, attempting to bridge the divide. "I think we all want to be heard. It's easy to feel threatened when the conversation shifts, but we have to remember that our experiences shape our views. Let's try to understand where each of us is coming from." The dissenters hesitated, but eventually began to share their perspectives. They spoke about their own experiences of feeling marginalized or overlooked in discussions about race. As they voiced their concerns, Michael realized that their anger stemmed from a sense of fear and confusion about changing societal dynamics. He listened intently, validating their feelings while gently guiding the conversation back toward empathy and understanding. "I appreciate you sharing your experiences. It's essential to acknowledge that everyone has different realities. The goal of this dialogue is to create a space where we can all learn from one another." As the evening unfolded, the tensions began to ease. Attendees engaged in meaningful conversations, addressing their differences while finding common ground. Michael felt a sense of relief wash over him as he witnessed the participants begin to connect, breaking down barriers that had once felt insurmountable. By the end of the evening, as the room filled with laughter and camaraderie, Michael understood the true power of dialogue. They hadn't solved all the issues that night, but they had taken a significant step toward bridging gaps and fostering understanding. As attendees began to leave, many expressed gratitude for the space created that evening. Frank approached Michael, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I came here expecting to feel attacked, but I actually learned a lot. I appreciate how you handled the dissent and kept us focused on dialogue." Michael smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you for sharing your perspective, Frank. That's what it's all about, being willing to engage and listen, even when it's uncomfortable." In the weeks that followed, the dialogue session sparked a wave of interest in further discussions. More community members reached out, eager to engage in conversations about race, privilege, and the importance of allyship. Michael and his fellow advocates organized additional workshops, incorporating the lessons learned from the first dialogue session to create even more inclusive spaces for discussion. However, amid the progress, Michael also noticed a growing divide among some community members. The pushback he had feared became more pronounced as certain groups mobilized against the initiatives aimed at promoting racial equity. Social media became a battleground for heated discussions, with people expressing their frustrations and opposition to the ongoing conversations about race. Feeling the weight of responsibility, Michael knew they had to address this backlash directly. He called for another meeting with his fellow advocates to discuss how to navigate the growing tensions. "We need to find a way to respond to the opposition without alienating those who are open to dialogue," he said. "It's crucial that we continue to engage in conversations, even with those who disagree with us." They decided to host a public forum dedicated specifically to addressing concerns surrounding the initiatives. The goal was to create an environment where community members could express their thoughts and ask questions about the work they were doing. They wanted to invite everyone to the table, regardless of their beliefs, emphasizing the importance of respectful dialogue. As the date for the public forum approached, Michael felt a mixture of apprehension and hope. He understood that the challenges ahead would require patience, resilience, and a commitment to bridging divides. He reached out to various community leaders, encouraging them to attend and contribute to the conversation. On the day of the forum, the community center filled with people, some eager to engage and others skeptical of the discussions about race. Michael stood at the front, looking out at the diverse crowd. He felt a sense of determination as he opened the forum, reminding everyone of the importance of mutual respect and understanding. "We're here today to listen and engage," he said, his voice steady. "No matter your perspective, we want to hear from you. Let's focus on finding common ground and addressing our concerns with open hearts and minds." As the forum unfolded, participants shared their thoughts, frustrations, and hopes. There were moments of tension, but Michael worked tirelessly to keep the dialogue focused and constructive. He encouraged participants to listen actively, to ask questions, and to challenge assumptions, all while maintaining respect for one another. The discussions were not easy. Some attendees remained entrenched in their beliefs, unwilling to consider alternative perspectives. However, as the forum continued, Michael noticed that many participants were beginning to engage in meaningful conversations, seeking to understand one another rather than simply arguing their points. At one point, a woman stood up, visibly emotional. "I've never really thought about privilege before," she admitted. "It's hard to confront, but I want to learn and grow. I just need help understanding how to do that without feeling guilty." Michael felt a surge of empathy for her struggle. "It's okay to feel uncomfortable," he responded gently. "Confronting privilege and bias doesn't mean you should feel guilty. It means you're willing to learn and be part of the solution. That's a powerful step forward." By the end of the forum, many attendees expressed gratitude for the opportunity to engage in difficult conversations. Michael felt hopeful as he witnessed a sense of camaraderie begin to blossom, even among those who had initially been skeptical. It was a reminder that while the journey toward understanding would not be easy, every conversation brought them one step closer. As he left the community center that evening, Michael was filled with a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that the work ahead would be challenging, but he was more committed than ever to fostering dialogue and understanding in his community. He had learned that change often begins with conversations, sometimes uncomfortable but ultimately necessary. With each dialogue they facilitated, they were dismantling the barriers of misunderstanding and building bridges toward empathy and allyship. In the days that followed, Michael continued to engage with community members, encouraging them to share their stories and connect with one another. He felt a sense of hope as he reflected on the progress they had made, knowing that every step forward, no matter how small, contributed to a more inclusive and understanding community. But he also recognized that the challenges would continue. There would be moments of pushback, resistance, and discomfort. Yet, he remained steadfast in his belief that fostering dialogue was essential to creating lasting change. With each workshop, each community forum, and each conversation, Michael was determined to continue the work of building bridges, empowering others to engage in the crucial discussions that would shape their community for generations to come. The journey was far from over, but with every step, he felt more connected to the cause and the people around him, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. A legacy of understanding. As winter descended upon the community, the air grew crisp and the days turned shorter. The chill in the atmosphere mirrored the tension that still simmered beneath the surface of many community conversations. Michael had spent the last few months reflecting on the progress they had made and the work still to come. The recent public forum had opened doors, but it also highlighted the challenges they faced in creating lasting change. One evening, as he sat at his kitchen table reviewing notes for an upcoming workshop, he found himself contemplating the impact of their advocacy. The community had been abuzz with discussions about race, privilege, and allyship, but the path forward still felt fraught with uncertainty. He recalled the voices of dissent that had emerged during the forums, the fears, frustrations, and misunderstandings that lingered in the hearts of many. Determined to foster understanding, Michael began drafting a comprehensive plan for the upcoming year, envisioning a series of initiatives aimed at deepening the community's engagement with these important issues. He wanted to create a legacy of understanding that would transcend the current moment, a commitment to ongoing dialogue and education. One of his ideas was to launch a community storytelling project. He believed that sharing personal experiences would create a powerful narrative that could resonate with others. The project would invite residents to share their stories related to race, identity, and community, highlighting both struggles and triumphs. Michael envisioned hosting storytelling nights at the community center, where individuals could come together to listen, share, and learn from one another. He reached out to his fellow advocates, presenting the idea with enthusiasm. Imagine the power of hearing personal stories from our neighbors, stories that reflect our diverse experiences and challenges. We could build empathy and understanding, bridging gaps through shared humanity, he explained during their planning meeting. The group responded positively, eager to contribute their ideas and insights. They began brainstorming how to structure the storytelling events, thinking about ways to promote inclusivity and encourage participation from all community members. They decided to feature a mix of voices, individuals from various backgrounds, ages, and experiences, so that the tapestry of stories would reflect the richness of their community. As the project took shape, Michael felt a surge of excitement. He created flyers to promote the storytelling nights and shared them on social media, encouraging community members to sign up and share their stories. The response was overwhelming. People began reaching out, eager to participate and share their narratives. When the first storytelling night arrived, the community center buzzed with anticipation. Michael stood at the entrance, welcoming attendees as they trickled in. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with laughter and conversation. He felt a sense of belonging, knowing that they were all there for a shared purpose, to connect, to learn, and to understand. As the night began, Michael opened the floor, explaining the format of the event. Tonight is about creating a space for storytelling. Each person will have the opportunity to share their experiences, and we'll all commit to listening with open hearts and minds. Remember, every story is important, and every voice matters. The first storyteller, a young woman named Aisha, took the stage. She spoke about her experiences growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood and the challenges she faced in navigating her identity. I often felt like an outsider, trying to fit into a world that didn't always see me, she shared, her voice quivering with emotion. As she spoke, the audience sat in rapt attention. Her story resonated deeply, and Michael could see the impact it had on those listening. Aisha's vulnerability created a bridge of understanding, and when she finished, the room erupted in applause, a collective acknowledgement of her courage and authenticity. As the evening progressed, more storytellers took the stage, each sharing their unique experiences. An older gentleman recounted his life during the civil rights movement, sharing tales of resilience and hope. A local immigrant spoke about the difficulties of leaving home and the struggle to find acceptance in a new country. Each story added depth to the evening, illuminating the diverse tapestry of the community. When the final storyteller concluded, the room fell silent, a palpable sense of connection hanging in the air. Michael stepped forward, his heart swelling with pride. Thank you all for sharing your stories tonight. Your voices matter, and your experiences help shape our understanding of one another. Together, we can continue to build a community that values empathy, compassion, and respect. After the event, many attendees lingered to discuss the stories they had heard. Michael observed small groups forming, with people exchanging contact information and promising to stay connected. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the storytelling night had accomplished its goal of fostering connections and understanding. Over the following months, the storytelling project gained momentum. The community center became a hub for sharing experiences, with more and more individuals stepping forward to share their narratives. The storytelling nights transformed into a regular event, each gathering drawing a diverse crowd eager to listen and learn. However, as the project flourished, Michael was also aware of the growing tensions that remained in the community. Certain factions were still resistant to the conversations surrounding race and privilege, viewing them as divisive. Social media became a battleground again, with heated debates erupting over the narratives being shared. One evening, after a particularly emotional storytelling night, Michael found himself grappling with the pushback they faced. As he scrolled through social media, he stumbled upon comments from community members who felt that the project was fostering division rather than understanding. Why do we have to focus on race? Can't we just be Americans? One comment read. Feeling frustrated, Michael put down his phone and reached out to his fellow advocates. We need to address the pushback directly, he said during their meeting. People are feeling threatened by these conversations. We have to find a way to engage with them constructively. The group agreed that they needed to create a platform for open dialogue, where those who felt uneasy about the conversations could express their concerns without fear of judgment. They brainstormed ideas for a community forum specifically designed to address these issues, inviting those who were hesitant to share their perspectives and engage in respectful dialogue. As the forum date approached, Michael felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He knew that addressing these concerns head-on would be crucial for moving forward, but he also worried about the potential for conflict. On the day of the forum, the community center once again filled with attendees. The atmosphere was charged with uncertainty, but Michael remained focused on the goal of fostering understanding. He welcomed participants, emphasizing the importance of respectful dialogue and the value of listening to one another. As the discussions unfolded, participants voiced their concerns about the storytelling project and the conversations surrounding race. Some expressed fears about divisive narratives and felt that discussions about privilege minimized their own struggles. Michael listened intently, acknowledging their feelings. I hear your concerns, and I understand why you might feel uncomfortable, he said, striving to maintain a calm and empathetic tone. But the purpose of sharing these stories is not to assign blame but to create understanding. Our experiences shape how we see the world, and it's essential to acknowledge that diversity. He encouraged attendees to share their own experiences, And as individuals began to speak, the dialogue shifted. People opened up about their own struggles, some describing feelings of being overlooked or misunderstood in discussions about race. Michael seized the opportunity to connect the dots. We all face challenges, and while our experiences may differ, we can find common ground. The goal is to create a space where we can learn from one another's experiences and grow together, he said, hoping to unite the group in a shared purpose. As the forum continued, he could sense a gradual shift in the atmosphere. Participants began to engage with one another more openly, asking questions and seeking to understand different perspectives. It was a reminder that while the road to understanding was fraught with challenges, it was also filled with the potential for growth and connection. By the end of the forum, many attendees expressed gratitude for the opportunity to share their concerns. Michael felt a renewed sense of hope as he watched individuals shake hands and exchange contact information, promising to continue the dialogue beyond the walls of the community center. In the months that followed, Michael and his fellow advocates continued their work, focusing on building bridges and fostering understanding. They hosted additional storytelling nights, community forums, and workshops, striving to create a culture of dialogue and compassion. As winter gave way to spring, Michael felt a sense of transformation within the community. Conversations about race and privilege had become more nuanced, and while tensions still lingered, there was also a growing recognition of the importance of understanding and empathy. One evening, as he stood in front of the community center, Michael watched families gather for a storytelling event. Children played in the grass, laughter echoing through the air, while adults chatted animatedly, exchanging stories and experiences. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they had undertaken together. Michael understood that the work was far from over. The road to understanding would always be a winding one, filled with challenges and setbacks, but he felt more committed than ever to continue advocating for dialogue, empathy, and connection. As he prepared to speak that night, he reflected on the many voices that had come together to create a tapestry of understanding. He felt privileged to be part of a community willing to confront difficult conversations and embrace the power of shared experiences. That evening, as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Michael stepped onto the stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his heart full. "We are here not just to share our stories, but to connect as a community. Each of us has a unique journey, and together we can create a legacy of understanding that transcends our differences." As the crowd settled in, Michael felt a surge of hope. They were forging a new path, one built on empathy and understanding. He knew that while challenges lay ahead, they were also filled with the potential for connection and change. And in that moment, he realized that the legacy they were building together was not just about addressing racial issues. It was about creating a community that valued every voice, every story, and every experience. Together, they were not just telling stories. They were writing a new narrative, one of resilience, understanding, and hope.